Welcome to Off the Wall. My name is Trey. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hope all is going well in your world. All is going pretty well in the arena and indoor football world, all things considered. We had our first mostly drama-free weekend of the AFL so far this season, this past weekend in week 4. We had a pretty eventful IFL week 10. And before we dive in any further, I think we need to address the elephant in the room, and that's the neon sign. We have a neon sign, so that makes us an official YouTube show. So big thank you to Joanna and Jay for hooking that up and giving that to me for my birthday, which was a few weeks ago. So we're official now. We have the neon sign to prove it. If you're listening on Spotify, you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can't see what the heck I'm talking about, go over to YouTube, search at Off the Wall FB, F as in foot, B as in ball, Off the Wall FB. It'll pull up the channel. Like all of our videos while you're there, subscribe while you're there, do all that stuff. But check out the neon light; it's pretty sweet. And if you're listening on YouTube, go ahead, hop into Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever floats your boat, and give us a good rating over there too. It helps us out. But we've got a ton of info to get into. We're going to start with the AFL this week. We actually had some games that we could watch, so I figured we'd flip the usual order that we go in. We usually go IFL first and then AFL later. We'll go AFL first. Then we got an interview with Malik Duncan, who is a defensive back for the Quad City Steamwheelers of the IFL, fresh off of a thrilling game against Iowa. We talk about his journey through the IFL, through indoor football, and some of the highs and lows that he's experienced along the way and what he has set for himself in terms of goals and set for his team throughout the end of the season. Spoiler, they won a championship. So, and then we'll dive into the rest of IFL week 10 and talk about some of the games that went down. Some of the games were super close. Some of them were decided by 1 or 2 points. Others were blowouts, and some of them were the worst losses in team history. So we had a little bit of everything across the board. Then lastly, we'll dive into a preview of IFL week 11, give a guess at what some of those lines might look like in terms of the spread and the totals, and then we'll get out of here. So without further ado, let's dive into AFL week 4. Now, before we dive into any games in particular, last week, towards the end of the episode, I mentioned there were some rumblings of Jeff Fisher potentially becoming the commissioner of the AFL. It was rumors that were coming from some pretty trusted sources, but wasn't official. So naturally, the day I put out the episode where I said it was a rumor, it became official. So Jeff Fisher is the new commissioner of the AFL, and this weekend of games was the first full weekend of AFL games where he was the commissioner running the show. And this was the first full weekend of games where every single game had a stream. So we're already off to a good start in the Fisher era. And the first game that we had was the Orlando Predators at the West Texas Desert Hawks. The Predators won this game 50-39 to get their first win of the season. This was a great get back game for the Predators after, quite frankly, not having their best showing last time they played West Texas in Orlando. They scored 0 points in the first half and didn't get their first touchdown until several minutes into the third quarter. They scored their first touchdown on the opening drive of this game, and they just looked a lot more fluid, a lot more comfortable, which is weird because the game where they just got destroyed was at home, but they look more comfortable in road games. I don't know what that means, but it was a great get back game for the Predators, like I said, and the special teams played a huge role for Orlando in this one. It gave kind of an old school arena football feel where special teams and defense for the Preds were making plays and causing turnovers on defense and running back kick returns. And the kicker played phenomenal for Orlando. Caleb Walls had an awesome kick return touchdown where it looked like things were going to go catastrophically wrong, and he avoided all the defenders and ran it back the other way for a touchdown. It was really, really cool. Head over to the Off the Wall Twitter page. I tweeted out the highlight, and since none of the teams or the league seemed to be tweeting out any highlights around that time, I tweeted out for the people. Don't you worry. And then, like I said, Dylan Barnes is the kicker for Orlando. He had 2 deuces and was connecting on extra points all night as well. So he played a very good role in the win for the Preds. And Drew Powell, he finally looked comfortable again. He looked really good in that season opener against Albany. Did not look good. The play calling was terrible in that second game against West Texas. Looked a lot better this go round. But there's not an asterisk, but there's a little bit of well in terms of the quality of this win because West Texas was missing multiple key players on both sides of the ball due to injury heading into this game, including their wide receiver Lonnie Outlaw, who plays a little bit of defense as well, and he's a massive target, like literally massive, 6'7". You can't miss him. He was their red zone threat all throughout the season so far. He didn't play in this game, so him and a couple other players were out. So West Texas was not at full strength, and you could tell at times that there was something missing, but you couldn't exactly put your finger on it. And to make things even worse, defensive back Nick Marshall was ejected in the second quarter for receiving two personal foul unsportsmanlike conduct penalties in the game. So in the AFL, if you get two of those, you're out. And so he was ejected in the second quarter, and they were already shorthanded. So they played the rest of the game with not a full lineup of people on their team. They had physical people out on the field, but it just wasn't the same West Texas team that they played a few weeks back. There were some incredible over the wall catches in this game for both teams, and it was just a great game to kick off the week of football. And it felt like a breath of fresh air from the previous reign of leaders prior to this one. So it's it was a good start. The stream was a little choppy to start. They mentioned that they were having some bad storms in the area, but it eventually cleared up, and the stream looked great in the second half. So overall, great start to the Fisher era of the AFL, and was a good way to kick off the weekend. The second game we're going to talk about is the Wichita Regulators versus the Nashville Cats, and Nashville won this game decisively, 58-26. This was the first Nashville home game, air quote home game, that was streamed and available to be watched. And the reason why I air quote that home game is because this game actually took place in Clarksville, Tennessee, which is about an hour northwest of Nashville. So not exactly a true home game, sort of neutral site, but close enough to Nashville to be considered a home game. So Jeff Fisher was at the game. He was greeting all the fans outside of the arena before the game, sold lots of tickets. It was Clarksville is a military town. There's a big military base there, and this was a military appreciation game and a military appreciation day. So it was just overall a great atmosphere, and it looked to be a great game and a good time had by most if you were a fan of Nashville. It was a very dominant performance by Nashville. They really ran it up in the fourth quarter. At one point in the third quarter, with 6.5 minutes left, the score was 24-14 in favor of Nashville. So it was only a 10-point game halfway through the third quarter, and Nashville just laid it on them, and it quickly turned into a 32-point game as they just had more depth and they just looked like the overall better team than Wichita. Quarterback Dalton Oliver made his first start for Nashville, which is a little bit surprising considering the caliber of quarterback they have in Ramon Atkins, but I guess he wasn't playing up to the standard that they were hoping for, so they decided to go a different direction, and it worked out great. Oliver had 7 touchdown passes and 164 passing yards. 4 of those passing touchdowns went to Braxton Haley at wide receiver. So Nashville looked really good, and they really turned it on in the second half. It seems like they were a little bit rusty with the new quarterback getting comfortable with some things in the first half, and they kind of found their rhythm in the second half and really laid it on them. Wichita really looked outmatched, like I said, as down the stretch. Nashville's defense went crazy. They had 6 total sacks and 2 interceptions, including one that was a very, very impressive diving over the wall catch. Initially ruled incomplete, but Nashville eventually challenged it and got it overruled to an interception. So, plenty of highlights throughout the entire game for Nashville. A couple good plays for Wichita. This was a great bounce back game for Nashville, and it was a bit of a gut check for Wichita. Wichita was riding high after upsetting Southwest Kansas last week, and Nashville was looking for a bounce back after getting, I don't know if you would say upset by Salina, but they lost to Salina at home. So this is a good bounce back for Nashville, and this showed what Nashville can be if everything's clicking and they can play their game. So here's to hoping that future home games for Nashville can also be streamed. And I know that we talked about this last week about the Nashville venue being a little bit of an older venue, but that doesn't mean anything. You could still stream the games. You could find a way if you want to. The league and the team just have to want to. So Wichita, not their best game, not their best showing, but some positive takeaways for this for them as well. The next game we're going to talk about is the Salina Liberty at the Billings Outlaws, and Billings won this game decidedly, 54-35, and Billings just dominated this game in all three phases: offense, defense, and special teams. The defense had 3 defensive touchdowns, 1 fumble recovery, and 2 interception returns for touchdowns. They were hungry for the ball. Coach Cedric Walker had them dialed in and ready to go. The defensive line was applying a ton of pressure to Salina quarterback Charles McCollum, who happens to be the IFL's all-time leading passer. So he's not just some scrub at quarterback for Liberty. He's a very, very good quarterback, and the pressure was able to get to him and caused a lot of mistakes for the Liberty. And the Liberty, they just couldn't get themselves out of the hole that they dug themselves into. They're still a very good team, but they just couldn't battle back from the deficit that they were in. Billings was just better in this game, and Isaac Harker at quarterback, he didn't have his best game. Some of the games he had over the past couple weeks to open the season were much better than this one, but he didn't have to do too much just because the entire team did a great job in this one. So Billings, I think, is still the best team in the AFL, the team to beat, in my opinion, because they're not just beating teams, they're beating teams very, very decidedly. Like there's no question of like, oh, Billings might lose this game. No. Every single game that Billings has played so far this year, they won, and they let you know that they won. So I think Billings is the team to beat. We have a team we'll talk about in a little bit that may be challenging for that throne over the next couple of weeks, but Billings is very good, and I'm very excited to watch them in the next couple of weeks. Now, I mentioned we had almost a full drama-free weekend in the AFL, and what I mean by that is the Iron Man rule of the AFL has been a staple for the AFL for the first 20, 25 years of their existence, as well as a major selling point for the AFL in the offseason leading into the game, where Ironman football means that 6 players on the field are going to be playing offense and defense. So 6 players on offense also play defense, 2 offensive specialists, usually a quarterback and a wide receiver. On the defensive side, those same 6 players plus 2 defensive specialists, usually DBs. That was what was sold to us in the offseason. Apparently, some of the teams were not fans of the Ironman rules, which is weird because they agreed to join the AFL, and those were the rules that were set. And over the first couple of weeks, if you go back and watch some of the games that were actually streamed, you'll see some of the teams were just blatantly ignoring this rule, which is a little odd to think about. They were blatantly ignoring a rule in the rule book. So was it something where the teams just mutually agreed, like, yeah, whatever, we don't like this? Or did the refs even notice? Did the league even notice? Just because, like, if you're not going to play Iron Man, that's fine. We just need to know that's the way. Because at halftime, Stephen Titus, who is the owner of the Billings Outlaws, had an interview with the broadcast team in Billings, and he mentioned that he made a phone call to Jeff Fisher, the new commissioner, over a, quote, rules clarification. And it turns out this is probably what that rules clarification was, because Billings has built their team out to play Ironman football. You have Coach Cedric Walker and Coach Cedric Bonner, who both came from the era of Ironman football in the AFL in the 90s and 2000s. So they built and developed their team. They developed their roster. They developed their game plans based on the fact that they would have Ironman football and people playing both ways. And a lot of the players that made plays for Billings in this game were Ironman players, play both sides of the ball. But Salina was one of the teams that apparently was not a fan of the Ironman rules and just didn't want to do it. So it's a little bit frustrating from the Billings perspective and from some of the diehards perspective as well, because they wanted to see this Ironman football, because that was the game that so many people grew up with, are nostalgic for, and it was ultimately what was promised in the offseason, but that's not what is being delivered. So going forward, it was announced, or not officially announced, but it was confirmed via a source close to the situation that the Ironman rule is no more. It's not required. They're going to have free substitution, meaning that you can sub people in and out as you please. They're not going to have restrictions on, you can only sub this person out once a quarter, once a half. None of that's going to happen, at least for this season. What that means for seasons beyond, we don't know, but that's the way it's going to be in the AFL for the rest of the year. So at least we know what's going on. Still waiting on an official word from the AFL on the reasoning or like an update clarification on it and the rules or what this means moving forward. Still waiting on that, but that's what we know so far. The next game we're going to talk about is the Oregon Blackbears at the Washington Wolfpack, and Oregon won this game 27-25. So a low scoring, very close game. And I'm going to be very, very honest with you. This was an ugly game for the first 3 quarters. But it became thrilling late. It had a really, really exciting finish to it. The first 3 quarters looked like a rugby scrum, just bodies running into each other and 4 or 5 yards in a cloud of dust, so to speak. But towards the end of the game, Washington scored a touchdown late with less than 2 minutes left to take the lead. And Washington's still looking for their first win of the season. So it looked like, okay, this is going to be it. This is going to be the opportunity for them to do it in front of their home crowd. But Oregon got the ball, and it seemed like Oregon was just going to drive down the field. It felt like they were just going to do it. But I don't know if it was the home field advantage of Washington or what was going on, but Oregon had 3 straight false start penalties that pushed them back into the shadow of their own end zone. And it suddenly wasn't looking too good. But Oregon battled through it. They eventually worked their way down the field, and they scored a touchdown in the corner of the end zone with about 25 seconds left to take the lead. And it was a thrilling finish. Washington ended up getting the ball back. They tried driving down the field to get close for a field goal, but they couldn't get out of bounds and stop the clock, and time ultimately expired. So the first 45 minutes of this game were very ugly, just rugby scrum football. But the last 10 minutes, it was pretty great. So Washington, Oregon, if you could just take that last 10 minutes and then just make the whole 60 minutes like that last 10 minutes, we'd be good. We'll be all right. But Oregon's undefeated. Not sure what the future holds for them in particular. When Jeff Fisher announced the new layout of the AFL for the rest of the season, they were not listed as one of the initial 10 teams, but they later were announced that they announced that they had a quote licensing agreement with the AFL to continue play in the season. So I don't know if they're going to be a scheduled plug team where if a team can't play for whatever reason, they get plugged in and they play. Are they going to be a permanent road? Are they going to be a permanent road team because of their home venue situation? We don't know. We don't know what that looks like just yet, but we'll have to be patient and see what happens. But Oregon is back after being folded. Some of the players for Oregon were posting on Instagram. It's like, man, I'm a free agent now. And then 12 hours later, they're like, just kidding, we're back. Very, very confusing time, but we'll have to wait and see what ends up happening with Oregon in particular. Washington's still looking for that first win of the season, but they are developing a pretty good home culture at that arena in Everett, Washington, and seems like they're building something good. Think they just got to get a seasoned veteran play caller in at Washington, because a lot of the plays that they run, if we're just being honest, kind of looks like they're making it up on the go as they figure things out, which kind of makes sense considering head coach doesn't have any arena football experience prior. You look at a lot of the teams that are really successful right now in this version of the AFL, they all have pretty lengthy resumes in arena football and indoor football. Washington, not so much. So it's not a surprise that they're struggling the way that they are. But hopefully they'll be able to get something figured out, maybe get a win or two on the board by the end of the year. But they got something special building in Washington in terms of the culture. Hopefully the on-field product can match that. Then the last game of the weekend for the AFL is the Southwest Kansas Storm at the Albany Firebirds, and Albany just thumped the Storm 66-15. It was never close. Albany scored 90 seconds into the game with Darius Prince. Darius Prince scored the first 3 touchdowns of the game for Albany. It just looks so easy for them. Albany just looks like a very well-oiled machine on offense and on defense. They're no joke either. They got the backups tons of reps. I think the backup quarterback played the entire second half. Darius Prince didn't play the second half at all. They rotated a lot of players that typically don't see a lot of playing time in those closer games, but got lots of reps, lots of PT for them. So super pumped for the Firebirds backups. But yeah, the backup quarterback for Albany looked really good. I would not be surprised to see him potentially playing or starting for another arena team. Maybe not this season because Albany's going to keep him tucked away, but over the next couple of seasons, would not be surprised to see him be the starter for another franchise. But Albany also forced 5 turnovers on defense. Southwest Kansas, they just looked outmatched in all phases of the game. They are missing their best player in Michael Lawson, who stepped away from the team a little bit earlier in the week for reasons not 100% clear, but they were missing him. He is a dynamic defensive back who has, I think, had 3 or 4 interceptions on the year already, tons of pass deflections and forced fumbles as well. So he was just anywhere the ball was, he found a way to get there and make a play, and they were missing that very badly on defense. So Southwest Kansas in a little bit of a free fall right now. They were upset by Wichita last week. They were blasted by Albany this week. I think they play Billings next week. So it's not getting any easier for Southwest Kansas. We'll have to see how they adjust and if they can make that Billings game a little bit more competitive than folks may think it will be. But Southwest Kansas, side note on Southwest Kansas, think about the travel that Southwest Kansas has to go through to get to Albany, New York. So they mentioned this on the broadcast. From Dodge City, Kansas, they have to go from Dodge City to Denver, which is about a 5.5, 6 hour drive, if I remember correctly. They have to fly from Denver to New York, and then they have to travel from New York City to Albany, which is not it's not a short trip. It's a pretty lengthy drive. And then they have to do all that to get back to Dodge City. So very lengthy travel for Southwest Kansas to get there, get thumped, and then have to have that same lengthy travel back. Just absolutely brutal. And I think it's an aspect of this version of the AFL that's not really thought of that often, and it's a little bit unfair for some of those teams like the Southwest Kansas, like a Salina, um, who it's not like Orlando to Albany. I'm sure there are plenty of direct flights from each place there. It's a couple hours of travel and you're there. And it's like, no, it's entire days for some of these teams to get to where they need to go. So hopefully it's something that gets worked out in future years in the AFL and something that they can get figured out for those smaller market teams. Just because it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. So that was AFL week 4. Again, a fairly drama-free week. All the games were streamed, so that's a step in the right direction. Have a full slate of games this upcoming weekend as well. I believe there will be 5 games streamed, so very much looking forward to those and seeing if we can get some positive momentum going with the AFL to close out the season. Next up, we've got an interview with Malik Duncan, who is a defensive back for the Quad City Steamwheelers. He's been on the team for a couple years now. He helped lead them to the 2022 IFL Championship. They had a bit of a rough start to the season, but kind of turned things around, and they're on the right path now. They're starting to turn a corner. Got a tough stretch of games ahead, but they're not ducking any smoke by any means, and they're looking forward to the challenge. So, without further ado, here's Malik. All right, joining us today on Off the Wall, we've got Malik Duncan of the Quad City Steamwheelers. Malik, thank you so much for joining us today. How are things going?
Going good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming off of an electrifying game against Iowa this past weekend, you got a bye week coming up. How did it feel to participate in such a back and forth thrilling game like that?
Man, it almost gave me a heart attack to be honest with you, but I love those kind of games because it just sees what kind of team that we have. To
Yeah.
keep fighting. That's the main thing. I gave a good speech at halftime to challenge our guys to go into this next half and to pretty much let's put our foots in the neck, and
Yeah.
show them we're better than that. And they accepted the challenge. But besides all the little things that went on that could have went south, could have, would have, should have, but we came out victorious, and that's the best thing that matters.
Yeah, it was looking like I was going to pull it off, but then it's not often you see what was it, a 49 50-yard field goal with no time left to win it in any level of indoor football, and it was just like, man, what a game from
Man,
start to finish.
what a game for sure. Definitely
Yeah.
shout out to Kaplan for that kick. He was doing that in college at Notre Dame College in South Euclid in Ohio. So
Yeah.
he's a dog, man. Cap's a good dude.
Nothing new for him.
No.
So we've had three different interviews on Off the Wall so far, and two of them specifically mentioned you as being an influential part of their journey through indoor football. So it only made sense that you were next up. So shout out to Justin Rankin and Trey Harvey. They
My
name
God.
dropped you, and I was like, all right, we got to do it. We got to make it happen.
I appreciate them for sure, man.
Yeah.
And I remember telling them, man, you got to just get into this league. I was one of them guys that I went to the Steelers camp, and then after that, I got released, and then I got into the Philadelphia Soul. But before Arena, I just never thought about nothing else. It was either NFL or bust or
Hmm.
CFL. I talked a little bit here and there to Hamilton and stuff like that, and then the
Hmm.
AAF. Somebody, my good family member of mine, Kenny Ville, he plays in the AFL. He tried to just hard get into playing. So then once I got into it and I seen how the arena game went, I tried to encourage anybody that was next up in my city, from anybody that I could know,
Hmm.
word of mouth. Hey man, if you ain't playing, don't sit there and wait. Cause I waited. Don't wait. Just
Yeah.
get in there if you can. Get in where you fit in, and then just let the chips fall.
Yeah, absolutely. Like getting anything on tape is better than letting your tape collect dust and thinking what if or what could have happened, right?
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So what specifically, like what was the start of your indoor journey? You mentioned you had someone that was trying to get you involved. Like what was there a specific conversation you remember having that was like, all right, let's do it? And how did that start? And kind of walk us through your IFL journey.
So what really happened was, so I had an agent at the time who he blew up now. So I shout out to him. But he blew up now. And I was with him when he first started, he had me and Josh Gordon to be exact. So
Okay.
he brought up the conversation of arena football, and I'm like, nah, I'm cool. I don't want to play arena. Like I just went to the
Hmm.
stadium, I'm about to go play arena. No, I'm cool. Downplaying it.
Yeah.
And then I got into coaching, and I was coaching college, and I loved it. I love football, so it was going good. But the itch to still play, I'm only 22 at the time, so it's like, okay,
Hmm.
I need to play. I'm sitting there with one of my roommates. He plays on San Antonio now. He was actually coaching with me. His name DJ Myers. Um,
Okay.
Sitting there, and he brought up, somebody emailed him. I'm like, I got the same email. So ended up being the Philadelphia Soul. They reached out to us about signing a contract. But prior to that, I was told about a workout for Baltimore Brigade with one of my close friends. His name
Hmm.
Delano. We went out there. I went to DC with him, and we went to Baltimore to go to a workout. So that was my first time really going to an arena type workout. It was different. Then after that, I went to a workout for Saskatchewan and Cleveland. And then just it was different, guarding high emotions. I was very successful in college. I didn't get scored on like 29 straight games. So
Hmm.
you do that, and then you go get some high motion and getting the ball caught on you is totally different.
Yeah.
Confidence, yeah. So um, to go from there, I got a chance with the Philly Soul, and then Coach Ross called me. I had about three offers. It was Green Bay to be exact, Bismarck, Coach Miller, and then Coach Ross. Talked to all three coaches on the phone. Great conversations, but it was just something that hit off with me and Coach Ross, and then I signed the Quad City. And then I got the Arena One offer originally in like January. Then I
Hmm.
called Quad City, told them like, "Hey man, I'm gonna go take this." Obviously, because I thought the opportunity was better.
Right.
From what I was told, Coach Ross told me, "Okay, I'm gonna let you go ahead, but just know, if things don't work out, we have your rights." I'm cool with that. I
Yeah,
bet on.
absolutely.
Went to the Philadelphia Soul. Coach Dozell was there at the time. And in my eyes, I showed out every day at camp, every day. I remember going in there the first day with cuts, and I went in there. They said, "We cutting you," and I'm like, "Huh?" And they're like, "No, we just playing with you, man. Just keep playing. You playing great. You're a young kid." So got my heart racing, man, and just
Uh-huh.
I'm just feeling it. But as we had 3 rounds of cuts, so the last round, I had a great week. So I'm like, "There's no way I'm getting cut." But then they end up cutting me. They said they didn't want to waste my talent on special teams and
Hmm.
things like that. So that's cool. I understand it. At the time, I didn't, but it is what it is. So then they
Right.
told me I had like 24 to 48 hours to leave. Okay. So made sure I left. And then I remember I get back to Cleveland. I sent Coach Ross the tape that I made from the Philadelphia Soul. He was like, "What are you doing now?" And I'm like, "I'm actually in Cleveland." He was like, "Can you get here Monday?" I said, "Yeah." And then
Yes, absolutely.
the rest was history. I went, came in, and then fun fact, man, people don't know. I actually practiced on Tuesday. Ended up becoming a starter on Thursday. We played Bismarck, and I gave up the game-winning touchdown. My first ever arena game-winning touchdown, like 8 seconds on the clock, something crazy.
Hmm.
Guy caught it, and I remember just he was just standing over me yelling, and they put the lights on me, and I'm like, damn, my first ever game.
Uh-huh.
But it woke me up ever since that day. I'm like, okay, that was the worst team in the league, and I just got scored on. But then the next week we had Sioux Falls, and then we were going to play Daquan Neal and them
Yeah.
in Iowa, which they were like, they only had like one loss. So I'm thinking, oh, this is only gonna get tougher. So I gotta get
Right.
ready. And I was playing corner first two games. Sioux Falls, I had like a good stat game. And they told me, you know what, man, I think I had led the team in tackles that day. And they said, you know what? Um, we move you to safety. You showing some physicality, we move you to safety. And
Yeah.
then that was my safety journey. My first game in Iowa was my first safety journey, and the rest was history.
That's awesome. It's funny to hear how everything kind of falls into place like that. How you
Yeah.
didn't necessarily expect it to happen that way, but it happened that way for a reason, right?
Yeah, I never expected to play safety. My college, my coaches always used to say, like, our whole secondary was safeties for real, but I was just good enough to play corner, but I never
Mhm.
thought about playing safety in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I've touched on this on some reels on Instagram, and you're one of my favorite players to watch because of your physicality and your style of play. Who
Thank
are
you.
some players that inspired you and that you kind of base your game off of?
Well, fun fact, I never liked to tackle in my life. Like, I
You fooled
never
me. You fooled
yeah,
me.
I never physicality was never part of my game ever. It didn't really get into my game until my junior year of college, and they moved me to boundary corner. And
Mhm.
my coach, Bishop Neal, he coach at Monmouth now. Um, he made us tackle corners. He just kept making us tackle, and we used to hate it every day. But it was like, if you want to play now, you have to tackle. So then that's
Mhm.
what really, I'll make some tackles. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't like it. Now it's like I love the contact. Like it,
Yep.
it, it gets me going. But some people like far as my game, well, you got to change your game around in the arena. But I try to just take. So I watch highlights every game day. I watch a set group of guys, and that's like that I personally know or somewhat know, and
Yep.
just try to and I just look at how they play. Like I watch Trey Wofford, my brother Darion Jackson. I got my friend Delando Boyd. He played in the arena. I got a friend from college named Keem. Them are guys who show like physicality. And then we had a safety in my college named Lorenzo Jerome. He never played arena, but he's a ball hawk. He always will either find a way to get the ball. He ran to the ball, he either gonna strip you or he gonna pick it off. So them guys right there is like them the people I'm watching to see, okay, how are they playing? Like,
Right.
what are they doing? Them are the people I'm trying to. But like when it comes to arena, it goes to like my friend Delando, my brother Darion Jackson, and then Trey Wofford. Them guys right there, and Merriweather. I love Merriweather game. Them guys right there, just you got to take bits and pieces,
Mhm.
and and just plug them into the game that I know. So that's what I really. And now, honestly, that's what I really do. It's crazy, but it's like, yeah,
Yeah, it's like film study, not just for the opposing team, for your own personal, like, hey, how can I make this type of play on this type of route when it's run at me? Like little stuff like that goes such a long way.
oh yeah, for sure, man. I was always a split second away because I was always overweight, and just out of shape and stuff like that. And that was just
Mhm.
due to like, more personal mental issues, that
Right.
I never really spoke about. But once I got that switch to get to my old self and get to who I am and who I know I can be, one thing I say about my head coach, he never counted me out. He always tried to encourage me because he knew things that I was going through, but he always believed in me. And when I
Yeah.
got when I'm making these plays this year, he don't congratulate me, because he tells me all the time, I always told you can do this. I already knew you can do this. I tried to tell
Right.
the world you can do this, but they're just now believing, which is true because I will, hear people talk about me, even commentators on other teams, and nobody knew that I can do what I can do. Now I
Right.
watch these. I try to rewatch the game the next day, just clear mind and everything, and just watch the game. And I hear commentators, and it's like, wow, just a year ago it was all this. You
Mhm.
was now you want to give me credit.
Yeah.
Well, it's just now starting. It's the second half of the season. I told myself after we just won, I said now it's time for me to turn up a notch for the second half because my goal is to win a national championship. My goal is to win Defensive Player of the Year because that's the only way that people will respect, the hard work that I put in this offseason every day, getting up at 4:30 a.m. with my boy Jared
Mhm.
Harrington. Nobody knows that.
Yeah. Yeah, let the apology be as loud as the disrespect, right?
Oh, yeah. My saying was everything's personal, and this still is for sure.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You mentioned it with the high motion, but defensively, what was some of the biggest adjustments you had to make going from the outdoor to the indoor game?
Um, Besides the high motion, it's the quickness. So for me, like I'm not a fast guy. Like I will admit that. I try to play to my strength. So once I
Mhm.
learn within the defensive scheme what exactly, our coach is trying to do, as time go on, I'm going to mix it into the point where I can play to the comfortability of me because I know, okay, I might not be this fast on this, or I might not be that fast, or I might, I can avoid the block this way if they run the ball this way. Different things I gotta play with that. I try to make everything. My whole goal is to try to make every play. Obviously,
Right.
you can't make every play, so I just try to just make adjustments to different things for real. Like I would just say the speed of the game, and it's slowed down. It's so slow for me now. It's crazy. It's
Right.
like, but back then it was so fast. It was like, okay, okay, oh my god. But now it's so slow. You can give me the call with 10 seconds left on a shot clock or
Right.
play, clock, and I can make calls boom that quick and read the formation and know what I got to do. Like that's where I have been the last 3 years, where I'm able to call the defense, tell guys where they need to go, tell you if you need to know what you're doing exactly.
Mhm.
Boom, boom, making checks. That's where just been my mind, and that's where I've been at.
Yeah, so if there was one thing you could tell rookie you in the IFL, what would one or two things be that if you could time travel and be like, "Hey, if you do this, life will be a lot easier." Like what would be some advice you'd give yourself?
Don't let the things that I went through mentally get to me to make me lose myself to gain all the weight that I did.
Mhm.
Will be the biggest thing because the things that I went through definitely was like it took me away as far as like it just I wasn't myself. So it's just like, and I will always fake my happiness, or sometimes I will be happy, but I was never truly happy.
Right.
Even like football makes me happy. Like every game, I'm happy. Every chance I can, I'm happy. Obviously, people go through things, that's that, but back then it just was like I would have never lost myself to have be that so out of shape.
Mhm.
That was and so I would say just not let the things get to me and just stay in shape. And then I would just say like, um, just first game, as soon as I got in, should have said I played safety and then went from there. If I
Mhm.
would have got two more games in the safety, I probably wouldn't have gave the game winner. We probably would have went to the playoffs. Those are the
Right.
different things that would have went differently for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so you mentioned the getting in shape before this offseason. I've heard that same thing on some of the broadcasts, how you went through like this physical renaissance. I think someone said on a broadcast. I was like, all right, that's a little dramatic, but you went through like this transformation in the offseason. Like, what was it that you just flipped the switch and was like, all right, let's go, let's get back to the old me? Like, was there anything like a specific moment you look back at
Oh,
and was like
hell,
the game time?
hell yeah, for sure. Uh, we played Frisco that playoff game, and I just remember, you know, the words and things people were saying to me. Um, the fans, the players on their team, on the field. And then I got scored on. And then, we on the bus after the game, and even people on my team were saying stuff to me. How you gonna let yourself get out of this? Da, da, da. And then I'm just sitting there like, damn, you know what? You're all right. You're all right. And I could never argue because they were right. Like,
Yeah, right.
say because you're right. You're absolutely right. I definitely you got it. That's what like when people would tell me that and people be on me, I'd be like, nah, like I'll brush it off. But that moment, I swear it was like a switch that boom. And then I remember we had like exit meetings and we was in the arena and then it was like, do you think Dunk can really lose weight? And they asked my coach that and he said, if Dunk turns into the person I know he is and he can flip that switch like he did before, he'd be more than ready and he gonna show y'all what he did. And I told him, I'm like, I ain't got nothing else to say. Like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
just do it. And then it was like on a Friday, the national championship was played. That Monday, I got to work. Boom. That Monday, 4:30 in the morning. And it was tough. It was tough at times, as far as like to get back. It was times I missed. I would never sit here and just say, "Yeah, I got it in every day." No,
Right.
didn't because it was times that I missed. It was times that I'm like questioning things because it wasn't moving as fast as I wanted it to.
Yep.
I had to accept that it's gonna be a grind. It's gonna be from August maybe to
Yep.
March or April. I have to accept that. I have to change the way I eat, the way I move, the way I think. and those it was just literally brick by brick,
Yeah.
and it just it really didn't see no transformation until like I stepped on the scale, then boom, I'm like, okay, I dropped this weight. Okay, boom, I dropped this. And I'm like, oh wow, like then it just started just coming off. And I'm like, oh yeah, now it's showtime. Like
Right.
really didn't really hit me to like say, oh, I gotta turn this up to about
Right.
Christmas, January. I said, okay, I'm about to start. And I'd be damned if I'm out of shape running
Uh-huh.
and nah, I said, I'm proving a point. And then especially we was playing Sioux Falls first game and definitely was just a lot of emotion for me every game.
Mhm.
So even when we played Frisco, like it was every game now. Every game is very emotional for me. Just because people will always talk crazy to me, but it was never about the talking because my whole life that's what it always been for me. Even when I was in high school and I didn't play at all, and I had people calling me Rudy and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
like it was never about the talking. It was just more like, how could you let yourself get out of that? How would you let yourself
Yeah.
get like so that switch, that Frisco game, that turned me up. So and unfortunately we didn't beat Frisco this year early in the season. But the best thing
Mhm.
about it is I got another chance June 8th. So
There
I'll
you
be
go.
sure. So that's the
There you
main.
go. Yeah. Yeah, and it says something about you as a person that you had the self-awareness to be like, yeah, yeah, you're right. Like you said, you kind of took a step back and was like, yeah, we got it. Something's got to change. I know a lot of people may not have taken that step, and a lot of people may have been like, nah, no, it's fine. I'm good.
Yeah.
So
It's
major
hard.
props to you.
It's hard, man. It definitely was hard. My mom and my sister, some of my biggest supporters, and when I heard my mom really chew me out, that's when she was like, you gotta turn it up now. Like you've been bullshitting
Yeah.
these last years. You got to turn up. I want to see it to the point where when you step on that field, they know the commentators is talking because like people was telling me what the commentator even when we went to the championship the commentators saying little some slick things and even
Hmm.
though that's cool you got it now but that's why I like it's cool. I look at every game now. I haven't heard no commentator say nothing crazy then, and
Right.
I'm haven't even really done things that I really can do. Everybody think I can't cover and stuff. I'm like, I'm an all-American corner. I
Yeah.
just
Right.
I just play within the system that they want me. If I'm helping the system be great in that position, then I'm gonna do it. So I don't have to prove none of y'all. I just gotta do my job and so we can win. And
Yep.
that's
Play your part.
exactly. Play my one
Yeah.
A's.
Yeah. It's a whole nother ball game when Coach Mom gets in the mix and she starts barking at you. That's when you know you got to get it together.
No, I'm a mama's boy, so it definitely
Yeah.
is definitely real.
In the IFL, there's so much roster turnover year after year. It's not really common to see a player in the same organization for 3+ years like you've been in. What is it about Quad City that keeps you coming back? And is there something about the culture of the franchise?
I'm big on I'm big on opportunities that was given to me. So like even
Hmm.
in college, like St. Francis gave me an opportunity and I stuck with it. It was times I wanted to transfer. My mom told me, no, they gave you the opportunity, they believed in you first. You either gonna stick it out or you ain't gonna play at all. So
Hmm.
since that day, that's what it been. Even in high school, I wanted to transfer. No, they believed in you. They gave you a chance. You better earn that spot from you, the last on that depth chart. You better go find a way to be number one.
Right.
So my mom is very hard on me. She really don't even know too much about sports. So like for Quad City, it was Coach Ross gave me the opportunity. He believed in me, moved me to safety. He allowed me to uh, call the defense. He believed in me as a leader, and I can never thank the man enough, to believe in me. Even when I was out of shape, a lot of coaches would have cut me just off the look, but he made sure he knew exactly what his defense, how he wanted ran. A guy like me, I can help that defense, even though even me being at that bad of a shape or whatever it was, I still can help him succeed. And that's what I did. I mean, we got to the championship and nobody even knew I had a torn meniscus and an LCL. That's what made me really start gaining the weight. I
Hmm.
had a torn knee and I was supposed to be out for the year, but we actually was going to play Green Bay. And I said, man, look, just give me a brace. I found out I was
Uh-huh.
torn. Give me a brace. I'm gonna just thug it for the rest of the season. I get surgery at the end. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
Nobody could believe it. They're like, how are you walking? How are you playing in the game? But I tell you, man, it was like the worst pain of my life. Like I couldn't
I
even
believe it.
I couldn't walk at after games. I couldn't even sleep. So it was crazy, but I never tell nobody to do that though. I'd never do it again, but
Yeah, right. Yeah.
it was real for sure.
Yeah, in the moment it felt like something you had to do, right?
Oh, for sure. I said I'm going to the championship. I gotta find a way to get there. I'm
Yeah,
be
right.
yeah, I'm going. So
Yeah. Yeah, so this year's Quad City team, a bit of a bumpy start to the season at times with some tough moments, but you guys have really turned it around the past couple of weeks. Is there anything specific that's changed, or was there a specific moment where it's like things started to click and started to string together some of these wins?
I would just say like we shot ourselves in the foot a couple
Mhm.
times, and um, we could have shot ourselves in the foot a couple times, but the team didn't capitalize. But at the end of the day, we've been fighting every game. No, like I said, no game is. Sometimes we start off. Some of these games we started off slow. And we finished strong. Prime example: we were down 30 points with 4 minutes left in the third quarter against Iowa 3 weeks ago. Then we turn around, we lose by two. You
Yeah,
know, that shows the true fight. We didn't play great in the first half, but second half played real good. So I mean, I just say like it's really no difference. Just dog. Our coach, feel that we just have to have passion over everything. Love over everything. He preaches stuff like that. Like we got to be hungry and we got to be ready to just give it everything we got, and that's the main thing. So I feel like guys have been giving it everything they got. The main thing just got to trust the system and then go from there. We trust what they do, what they call. If they beat us, they beat us. If they don't, they don't. As long as we do what this call, we can never get, chewed out about it because we did what the coaches asked.
right. Yeah, it seems like a lot of I mentioned this in a few of the weekly blogs I do, where so much of the stuff it's like you guys were beating yourselves at times. Like it wasn't even that the other team was beating y'all, and I could imagine how frustrating that was for you guys. Where it's like, man,
Oh,
if we just got out of our own way, we'd be
yeah.
perfectly fine.
Penalties and everything, man. It's
Yep.
unreal, but I mean, it's part of football, man. And I'm honestly like I look back on it, it's like it's good that we are going through these things because if you go 16-0 and you don't go through no adversity, and then you get in that
Hmm.
in that playoff, and then you go through adversity, how are you going to respond? You might think you're going to respond good. Okay, one out of 21 players, I might respond good, but the other 20 might not. So
Right.
you go through those things early. Now you're good.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, well, those are all I had. I had one last question for you, but it was about the goals. But you actually hit on that about wanting to be defensive player of the year and get into that championship. So
Yeah.
you actually have a podcast of your own. And where can people follow along with you on your personal journey through football and as well as the podcast? Where can people follow along with that?
My podcast, The Extra Yard. You can see it on my personal Instagram page. You can type in Malik Duncan or Dunk underscore one. Um, that's where you can find me exactly. You'll see everything for my podcast is on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and things like that.
Sweet. Yeah. If you're listening on podcasts, I'll have the links directly to those socials that I mentioned in the description. If you're on YouTube, same thing. So you'll be able to easily find where Malik's posting his stuff both on his personal page and on his podcast. So Malik, I appreciate you hopping on here. Any last parting words for the people before we get out of here?
No, I mean, just make sure you show love to Quad City.
Yeah.
You got 8 more games in the regular season, then it's to the dancing. So, show us some love, show us some support. And hey, man, see you in Vegas. That's the goal. See you in Vegas, August 17th.
Let's go. Awesome. Thank you, Malik.
Thank you, man.
Big thank you again to Malik Duncan for joining the show today. Give him and his podcast a follow on Instagram. Let him know you heard him on Off the Wall. And I'm sure he'd get a kick out of it. I'm sure we'd get a kick out of it too. But we're going to dive into some of the IFL Week 10 games, talk about some of the results of those games, and talk about some of the things that I noticed when I was watching them. First off is a game that Malik participated in. It was Quad City versus Iowa. And Quad City won this game 57-55, and it was a thriller. Um, Probably one of the best games of the entire year from start to finish. Easily a top three game so far this season. Into the season, it might be the very best one, all things considered. So we joke about some games being off the wall certified bangers. This was a certified banger for sure. So if you're going to watch any game from this past weekend, Iowa versus Quad City. And that's the one. Starting with Quad City, their offense looked pretty good in this game. Nothing really stood out, good or bad. Mike Irwin at quarterback had 2 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns. They played error-free football for the most part. They had a bobbled snap that led to a fumble recovery for Iowa that allowed them to take a lead late. But ultimately, Quad City played a pretty clean game on offense, which is what they needed. Quad City's defense and special teams showed up and provided a bit of a spark. Their kicker, which Malik alluded to a little bit earlier, Kyle Kaplan went 5 for 6 on field goals, including a 53-yarder in the fourth and a walk-off 49-yarder to win the game with no time left. 49 and 53-yard field goals in the NFL on a full field with a full goalpost is impressive. The fact that those goalposts are 9, 10 feet wide and he was nailing them from 49 and 53 with all that pressure on him, pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. So, big shout out to Kyle Kaplan. He's got to be the special teams player of the week in the IFL. So, by the time this comes out, that'll probably be announced. That's my prediction. Hopefully, it's right. But if there is something the Quad City could take away from this game, it's that they need a lot more of their drives to end in touchdowns and not field goals. It's great that Kyle Kaplan was able to hit 5 of 6 field goals there, but if you're attempting 6 field goals in that situation, that means your offense is not finishing drives the way that you would want them to. So I think that's something they can improve on. Already a step in the right direction with some of that mistake-free football that we talked about, but finishing drives is the next step for Quad City. And the next couple of games are not going to be walks in the park. They've got Green Bay and Frisco after a bye week next week. So they'll get tested as soon as they come back from their bye week, but they look to be making progress in the right direction. And on the other side, I never, based on how this season has gone so far, I never thought I'd say this. Iowa looked good on offense. Like that's such a weird sentence to say out loud based on how the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season went. But Kyle King, quarterback for Iowa, arguably had his best game of the season to date. And ultimately, he put the team on his back. Running back Robert Washington got hurt early in the game, and they ended up putting Darius James Peterson, who was the starting quarterback at the beginning of the year, in at running back, and he was taking some reps, going out for passes, blocking. So they were very thin at running back, and the game plan kind of showed that. They are very pass heavy. They had very little running in the game plan at all. Robert Washington eventually came back, but was sparingly used. So it seems like he might have been just a decoy at times. But Kyle King was connecting on some deep passes. We're talking 39, 45-yard passes that connected for touchdowns, including one where he threw it up to his receiver. His receiver just went up, mossed the DB, caught it, stumbled into the end zone for a touchdown. So Kyle King looked great. He connected on the throws that he needed to make over the past couple of weeks. We were talking about he wasn't able to make those plays in those opportune times that they needed it. This was a situation where when they needed him to step up, he stepped up, including at the end where they went for a 2-point conversion to take a 1-point lead with 9 seconds left, and they got it. So they were on the road. They were sitting at 2-5. They needed to be aggressive to walk away with a win. And quite frankly, they lost on a 49-yard field goal with no time left. There's not much else they could have done in that situation over those last 5 minutes of the game. Absolute heartbreaker for Iowa, especially considering how well they played on offense in this game. Right now, they're saying at 2-6, they have to go streaking immediately if they want to have a shot to make the playoffs. Because the way the rankings are, the way the standings are setting up, 9-7 might get you there. But if you're currently 2-6 and the goal is 9-7, that means you got to go 7-1 over the last 8 games of the season. Probably not going to happen, but if Iowa's offense plays like this, it gives them a very good chance to do it. So it's going to be a tough road ahead for Iowa, but we'll see if they can get better from here. Next game we've got is the Northern Arizona Wranglers at the Massachusetts Pirates, and Northern Arizona won this game 41-40, so a 1-point game. First game was a 2-point game. This is a 1-point game. So Northern Arizona traveled across the country to Lowell, Massachusetts, and walked away with the win. First off, with Northern Arizona, it looks like they have the runaway leader for the IFL Rookie of the Year in quarterback Joshua Jones. He has been very, very impressive over the last 6 games or so. He had a rough opening game against Arizona. But ever since then, he's looked really solid as a whole. He has a 26-3 touchdown to interception ratio with 9 touchdowns on the ground as well. So he's not making a ton of mistakes. He's very efficient with the ball. As we've talked about the past few weeks, they might run him a little too much for the offense to really be effective and to get the ball in the hands of different playmakers. But if there is going to be a rookie of the year at the end, there's no if. But right now, he's looking like the one for that award, given how some of the early contenders on other teams were injured and missed some time. Joshua Jones has been healthy for the most part all season and has led his team to some very solid wins and a 5-3 record. And a ton of credit goes to Coach Les Moss and the rest of his staff for finding ways to get the most out of not just him, but the rest of the young talent on the roster. Northern Arizona has one of the youngest rosters in the entire IFL with a ton of rookies in rotation. And they just have a solid coaching staff there. And they find ways to get the most out of their players. Northern Arizona also had multiple over the wall catches. It looked like they were kind of doing it intentionally at a certain point, but one of them actually made the Sports Center top 10 on Saturday. So it was very cool to see the IFL get that type of recognition for the fifth time this season, making that Sports Center top 10. But the Wranglers, they efficiently spread the ball out amongst all their playmakers, and they kept the Pirates defense guessing for the most part throughout the game. The defenses really stepped up in the second half and caused several turnovers on downs for each team. But it was a really great game plan and execution on Northern Arizona's part to take home the win on the cross country trip. And it's a lot easier to make that long flight back to Arizona with a win. So happy for the Wranglers and happy that they were able to get that. On the other side, if we're talking about positives for Massachusetts, there's really only one, and that's running back Jimmy Robinson. He had 5 touchdowns on the ground in this game, and that was about the only bright spot for the Pirates. The Pirates defense managed to keep them in the game late, like I touched on earlier. Couple turnovers on downs. Pirates had the ball and they had an opportunity to win this game, but they had their own turnover late that ultimately cost them the game and sealed it for Northern Arizona. Both quarterbacks were dinged up pretty badly in this game. Alejandro Benefield only didn't have a ton of passes through the first 3 quarters. They were feeding Jimmy Robinson the ball almost too much. So it's weird. We talk over the past couple of weeks about we need teams to feed their running back, feed the running game, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Meanwhile, Massachusetts, they might have ran the ball too much. They have a really good wide receiver group in Thomas Owens and T.O. Redding and Darren Carrington, and Isaac Zico is out on the IR for right now. But that trio of wide receivers, along with Jimmy Robinson running routes, there's no reason why that group should not be impactful in the passing game. And they just weren't there. It just wasn't very present. I think after the game, between the 2 quarterbacks from Massachusetts, I think they had 11 passing attempts, and they just couldn't get into a rhythm. They couldn't really get things going and get it into the hands of their playmakers at all. And considering they only lost by 1, they couldn't get the ball into any other playmaker's hands but Jimmy Robinson. Imagine what could have happened if you spread the ball out a little bit more and got more folks involved and opened things up with the passing game. So I don't know what the problem is. Yet another game that the Pirates couldn't break 50. They've only broken the 50-point threshold once this year. And considering the quality of players that they have, they should be able to do that pretty consistently. So on paper, the team, they have the team to do it. But if it's not the players, is it the execution? Is it the play calling? Is it the coaching? Something is off there, and they got to get it figured out because they're not hitting the panic button, but if this is the panic button, their hand is hovering over it. Like it's pretty close. So we'll see if Alejandro Benefield is healthy enough to start in their next game. We'll see, we'll see if we'll see if their backup is even healthy enough to start after the big hit that he took. So a lot of unknowns for the Pirates right now, and offensively they got to get some stuff figured out quickly. The next game we're going to talk about is the Frisco Fighters at the Green Bay Blizzard, and Green Bay won this game decisively, 67-38. An absolute thumping of the Frisco Fighters, the worst loss in Frisco Fighters team history at the hands of the Green Bay Blizzard this past weekend. Last week, I said Frisco has really set itself apart as the class of the Eastern Conference, the best team in the Eastern Conference. Green Bay got in their feelings a little bit, and they had something to say about that. This was a tight game. It was 31-31 at half. They traded blows all throughout the first quarter and the second quarter, and to an extent to open the third quarter, but the Green Bay Blizzard just went on a 29-0 run to end the game and really blow it wide open. If you're a Green Bay Blizzard fan, this is probably the dream scenario, just beating the hell out of Frisco and doing it on the ground the way that Green Bay does. They had what do I got here? 30 rushing attempts combined from Max Mailer and EJ Burgess, 121 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. That's blizzball if I've ever seen it. The defense stepped up big. They only allowed 4 completed passes all game. On the ground, they gave up a ton of yardage, but they gave up nothing in the passing game. So their passing defense has been phenomenal all year, and this was another example of it. And as soon as they got that lead on Frisco, forced them to throw the ball, the defensive line applied a ton of pressure and forced them into making mistakes, and the wheels just fell off for Frisco. So amazing game by Green Bay here. They're going to be a very tough out, and they're probably going to run through the Eastern Conference over these next couple of weeks through the end of the year. So they're for sure going to make the playoffs. It's just a matter of what seed they're gonna be. But yeah, the way that Green Bay is playing right now, they have seen over the past couple of years they either have a strong defense or strong quarterback play, not both. This year they finally have both, and it's a scary thought for the rest of the East, considering Frisco Frisco was the king of the East, or so I claimed last week, and this is what they did to him. So Green Bay, what a game for the Blizzard. On the other side, things started off great for Frisco. First play from scrimmage, 30-yard touchdown run by Martez Carter, got on the board immediately. They outscored Green Bay 21-7 in the first quarter, and it looks like Frisco was about to go on a run and do the Frisco thing that they usually do. But they could not get anything going in the passing game. They had 4 completions, like I said, on the day. I think they had 12 total attempts. So going 4 for 12, not good. 2 interceptions on the day. So you completed 6 passes, 2 to the wrong team. On the ground, they had close to 150 yards rushing between Harrington at quarterback and Carter at running back. But when you go back and look at the runs, Martez Carter had 70 yards on the ground total. 65 of those 70 came on 3 individual runs in the first half. So it wasn't a consistent 70. It was a couple of big plays and then running right into the back of the offensive line, and that Green Bay defense really stepping up. So this was literally the worst loss in Frisco Fighters history, and they just got the doors blown off of them. And things are not getting easier for them. They've got San Diego Strikeforce next week in San Diego, so it's going to be very interesting game there to see if Frisco can bounce back, because San Diego is getting hot in their own right, based on the game that we'll get into a little bit later. But Frisco, this is the first time that they got fully not just punched in the mouth, but TKO'd, and we'll see how they can rebound from this. Next game we're going to talk about is the Tulsa Oilers at the San Antonio Gunslingers, and San Antonio won this game 54-43, and it wasn't as close as that 11-point margin may indicate. Starting with San Antonio, Sam Casanova again did the same Casanova thing. I feel like a broken record, but he went 20 for 25, 274 passing yards, and 7 passing touchdowns. Just an absurd numbers, and he seems to be doing it every single week. He's currently on pace for 92 passing touchdowns on the year with a 73.5 completion percentage. 92 passing touchdowns. That is absurd. Just an absurd amount of passing touchdowns. The offense continues to impress, and they might be the most impressive single unit in the IFL. Green Bay's defense is a close-ish second, but San Antonio's offense has just been unbelievable all year. But the San Antonio special teams kind of opened the door for the Oilers to get back in this game, and the defense held on for just long enough for San Antonio's offense to get back into the swing of things and increase the lead again. But Gunslingers, they're in a decent spot at 4-4 after this week. but it's going to take continued improvement from their defense and their special teams to continue the climb that they're on, because they put themselves in a hole early with an 0-3 start, and they've gone 4-1 since. So they're sitting at 4-4, looking pretty good, but they're going to have to get better on defense and special teams to continue. On the other side, for Tulsa, it was a bizarre week for Tulsa. Um, the IFL and teams don't really do a good job of really announcing when transactions take place and really publicizing, like, hey, we released this player, we added this player. They kind of on the sly signed last year's quarterback Andre Sale, who was signed with the Louisiana Voodoo from the AFL. Things didn't really work out there, so he came back to the Tulsa Oilers. And we don't know if they released Daniel Smith, the previous quarterback, or what the deal is. He's not listed on the roster anymore. He wasn't on the transaction list on the IFL's website, but it isn't fully known. And it's a little odd because Daniel Smith started off the year pretty hot through the first 5 weeks of the season. He had multiple 5-6 touchdown games. He had an 8 touchdown game at one point. He was the IFL Offensive Player of the Week, and apparently a rough couple games over the past few weeks was enough to say, see ya, we're going back to our quarterback from last year. As you would expect, Tulsa's offense had a very slow start with a new quarterback in the mix. And at one point, the Gunslingers were leading the Oilers 40-15 in the third quarter. And Tulsa fought and clawed their way back, got a couple breaks their way due to some turnovers on special teams from San Antonio. But San Antonio ended up pulling away again, and Tulsa ended up scoring a touchdown with no time left to cut it from a 17-point deficit to an 11-point deficit. So that's why I alluded to about it not being as close as the final score may indicate. But Andre Sale, he did connect for 4 passing touchdowns in the second half. So if you're looking for a silver lining here, first half was a little rough. Second half kind of started getting things together through some touchdowns in the game, through 6 total in the game. So it's not all bad, but they need a much better start in order to contend, especially with this quarterback in. He's not as much of a mobile threat as Daniel Smith was. And so if you're going to be successful in the IFL, we talk about it every single week with multiple teams, you have to have run pass balance. Unless you're San Diego, you can get away with it. But even then, they have to have some run balance. But especially for Tulsa, when you have a running back the quality of Jared Ware, you need to feed him the ball. You need to get him rushing attempts early and often to open up some things for that talented group of receivers that the Oilers have. It's just odd. They were pretty balanced and somewhat run heavy over the first 6-7 weeks of the season. But then with Andre Sale at quarterback, it flipped immediately to being pass heavy. So they don't really have a identity anymore. And they're entering a very rough stretch of their schedule where they're sitting at 3-5. And as we talked about earlier, in the Eastern Conference, you got to be at least 9-7 to make the playoffs. And that still might not be good enough. So you look at where they're at 3-5, they got to go 4 and let me do the math here. No, 6-2 over their next 8 games in order to hit that 9-7 mark. And they basically hit the reset button on offense with this new quarterback. So can they do it? Yes. Will they do it? I don't know. That's going to be an uphill battle, especially with the schedule that they have over the next couple of weeks. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but they'll need to get things figured out as soon as possible on offense, because the defense can only do so much if the offense isn't playing complementary football. Next up, we've got the Sioux Falls Storm at the Jacksonville Sharks. And this game was basically an elimination game because both teams came into this game 1-6. And if you lose this game, you're probably out of the playoff picture, because you'll likely need to go 8-0 in your last 8 games in order to even have a chance to make the playoffs. And it's just not going to happen with either of these teams. So Sioux Falls ended up winning 52-42, unofficially eliminating the Jacksonville Sharks from the playoff hunt. And this game was pretty entertaining, back and forth all throughout the game until the end of the second quarter, when the Storm went on a 28-0 scoring run and really pulled away. Lorenzo Brown Jr. Had 6 passing touchdowns on the day, a little bit of a turn back the clock moment for Lorenzo Brown, and totally flipping what Sioux Falls has been over the past couple of weeks. I think a few weeks back, they had 6 rushing touchdowns and no passing touchdowns. Here was the total opposite. They had 6 passing touchdowns. So interesting to see the shift in the offensive philosophy for Sioux Falls. But they had a pretty decent balance in terms of run to pass ratio, 19 runs, 26 passes. And that veteran IFL experience of the Storm really showed in this matchup. And on the other side with Jacksonville, they just stink. Like they're not good. I kind of fell into the trap that they set when they beat Tulsa, but as we've seen over the past couple of weeks, Tulsa might not be that great either. Um, it's sad to see because they came in as the reigning NAL champions from their previous league, and they were getting hyped up by a lot of folks around the league saying like, "Oh, Jacksonville's going to be interesting. Jacksonville's gonna contend early on," because I think back when Massachusetts joined the league, they came from another league, immediately won the IFL championship. So there were some allusions to that potentially happening with the Jacksonville Sharks, and those predictions could not have been any more wrong. When you look at the final scoreboard, they lost by 10, 52-42. But when you dig in a little bit further, they were down 53-27 with a minute 13 left in the game. So they were basically doubled up, or excuse me, 52-27 with a minute 13 left in the game. And they scored 2 touchdowns in the final minute to bring it to within 10, including one of them was a blocked field goal that got blocked, picked up, and returned for a touchdown by the same person. Crazy play by Ulrich Jones. But this team got worked, and their season is basically done. Um, I say basically because it's still possible for them to go 8-0, but if you've watched any game of the Jacksonville Sharks this year, you know they're not going 8-0 over these next 8 games, and they need to do that, or at the very least 7-1 over these next 8 games to break 500 or to break even, and it just doesn't look like they have the team to do that. Next up, we've got the Bay Area Panthers at the Arizona Rattlers, and Bay Area won this game 68-52. So this was the Dalton Snead revenge game for the Arizona Rattlers, but unfortunately, Bay Area would not be denied and could not be stopped on offense. The Bay Area, if you're a Bay Area fan, you have to be extremely happy with how this game went down and how this season has gone down, honestly. Bay Area hasn't looked their best through these first 8 games of the year. They've had their backup quarterback start a couple games. They've had a few folks out due to injury. They've had a few folks out due to suspension on the defensive side of the ball. Despite all those things and despite not looking their best, they're sitting at 7-1, tied for the best record in the league. And the offense seems to be clicking now. Now the offense is getting it together. The defense has been playing great all year. Now the offense has decided that, hey, we're going to go out and score 9 touchdowns today. That's got to be terrifying for other teams. And their defense is only going to get better next week when some of the players return from the San Diego suspension, which should also be terrifying. So this team is only going to get better over these next couple of weeks. And the time to strike Bay Area, that window might have passed. They're only getting stronger through the second half of the season here, and that's not good. That's not good for the rest of the league. They ran the hell out of the ball versus Arizona. Arizona has the worst rushing defense in the league, and Bay Area knew that, and they ran the ball, ran the ball, ran the ball. They had a 29-8 rush to pass ratio, which is crazy to have almost 4 times as many rushes as passes and to win this game as decisively as they did. They had 157 yards on the ground and 6 touchdowns, with Daquan Neal throwing an additional 3 through the air. This was a dominant performance by Bay Area, and for Arizona, it's not all bad. The offense looked really good and they played really well. They just got bull rushed at the end of the first half by Bay Area and they couldn't keep up. And what I mean by that is with 3:25 left in the second quarter, Arizona was leading 24-21. All right. So Arizona was in there. They had the lead. There was an early challenge review that was a little sus. If you watch the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Player fumbled the ball clearly on the 1. They ruled it a touchdown, but I digress. So Bay Area scores, makes it 28-24. Bay Area does a surprise onside kick, recovers, scores 34-24 immediately. Bay Area gets the ball to start the third quarter, scores 41-24. Arizona has a turnover on downs. Bay Area takes over, scores 47-24. So in a span of 10 minutes of game time, Arizona went from leading by 3 to being down by 23 like that. And that's Bay Area. That's what Bay Area can do to you. Daquan Neal is reunited with Dixie Wooten, who he won an MVP with way back when in Iowa, and it seems like they're on the same page. Things are finally starting to click, and man, it's we might be in trouble with Bay Area running the league the rest of the season. But going back to Arizona, Dalton Snead, he looked good, but the Rattlers just got outplayed on special teams, and they had a couple key moments in the game where they could have crawled back into it, and they just whiffed on a couple of those key moments. But with Snead at quarterback, Arizona's going to be in the mix for the playoff hunt, and if you make the playoffs with Dalton Snead at quarterback, you can't rule them out by any means. But in the Western Conference, being 4-4 right now, you got San Antonio, who's also 4-4. You've got San Diego, who's at 5-3. You've got a lot of teams in that middle of the pack area, and it's gonna be a gauntlet to see who survives the West and ultimately makes it into the playoffs. Next up, we've got the Vegas Nighthawks at the Tucson Sugar Skulls, and Vegas came into this game as the last unbeaten team in the league, and they left with their first loss of the season. Tucson won this game 51-50, and this was another game that earned the badge of off the wall certified banger. This was a very, very fun game that took place in Tucson on the gray field they got there. It was a thriller, back and forth through the majority of the game. Went to overtime. It was 43-43 heading into overtime. Vegas scores, kicks the extra point, goes up 50-43. Tucson gets a chance to respond. They score a touchdown. They decide to go for two. So they scored the touchdown on a handoff to Mike Jones, runs around the corner on a sweep, gets into the end zone. They go for two. They run the exact same play and get the 2-point conversion and dethrone the unbeaten Vegas Nighthawks and give them their first loss of the year. So this was a game that Tucson needed badly to win to get back into the mix of the playoff hunt. They're still not in it yet, but to even be in the conversation, they needed this and they got it. So um, running the ball is what Tucson does really well, especially with Malik Mitchell at quarterback. And they did that pretty well in this game. They averaged 4 yards per carry. They spread out 22 attempts across 5 different players. And this wasn't the best game that Malik Mitchell has played, which is both good and bad, depending on your perspective. So if you're a Tucson fan, it's good because he didn't play his best, and you still knocked off the #1 team in the league. It's bad because we're at this halfway point of the Sugar Skulls season. They've played 8 games, and they still haven't been able to match their output from the first couple of weeks. So he's a couple weeks returned from injury. Hopefully, we can get back to the form that he had in those first couple of weeks where he was scoring 6, 7, 8 touchdowns in a given week. But they're going to need Malik Mitchell to perform at a high rate in order to claw back into that playoff hunt, especially in the Western Conference. But on the other side, Vegas usually pounces on their opponent early and leans on them with an aerial assault. Jerome Johnson usually picks apart a defense with his arm and then finds ways to make plays on the ground. And that was just missing. They had a pretty balanced attack, but they weren't able to get those big chunk plays that we have seen out of Vegas so far this year. We've seen a lot of Caleb Holly getting a 30, 40-yard grab here. We've seen a lot of Wyndham getting a 30, 40-yard grab here to really stretch the field. We didn't see that in this game. So I don't know if it was a breakdown on Vegas's end. I don't know if it was a great defensive strategy from Tucson's end, but Vegas could be in trouble over the next couple of weeks. And I say could be because, again, the IFL doesn't really share info in terms of players and injuries. But it looked like Jerome Johnson went down with an injury and was replaced by the backup George Reyna. It looked like he landed on his shoulder and he was favoring it. There was a clip, like you see it in the broadcast where he lands on the shoulder and then he gets up and he tries to like do like a throwing motion, like kind of feeling it out, stretching it out. He ended up playing one more play, handing the ball off. That ended up being a touchdown, but he didn't see the field again. So he could be hurt. And if he is hurt, if he misses an extended period of time, that could be problematic for Vegas because he is the X factor for Vegas. When he's on, they are the best team in the league. When he's looking a little shaky and out, they don't look They don't look too good. But something interesting to watch with Vegas over these next couple of weeks as well is going to be the penalties that they accrue in late in the game. In this game in particular, they had multiple penalties in the fourth quarter that really derailed them from potentially taking this game and escaping Tucson with a win. They just got very sloppy towards the end. They drew a lot, or they had multiple dumb, unsportsmanlike, and personal foul penalties, which we've seen quite a bit. You go back to the Jacksonville game a few weeks back; they had a ton of penalties in that one. Saying it's a discipline thing sounds a little bit dramatic, but it might be a maturity thing as well, where you're the best team in the league. It should be expected that you're beaten down on a 1-6 team. So when you score a touchdown to go ahead, I don't know what good getting up in another player's face and taunting does for you. Like, it's expected that you'd be doing that. And it's expected that, like, you went to the game as 14-point favorites. Of course you should be scoring touchdowns. So Vegas could get in their own way a little bit with these boneheaded penalties, but it's going to be something interesting to watch and could be something that costs them games down the road, because this didn't directly cost them the game, but it didn't help them either. So it's an interesting spot that Vegas is in. They're still a very, very talented team. Offensively, they have one of the best offensive rosters in the entire league. Defensively, they find those moments to make big plays. But does Jerome Johnson miss extended time? Do these boneheaded penalties come back to haunt them in the future? We'll have to wait and see. Last game of the slate is the Duke City Gladiators versus the San Diego Strike Force, and San Diego decisively won this game 47-21. Typically in the IFL, if you get one or two defensive stops each half, looks pretty good for you at the end of the game. San Diego had 4 interceptions, 2 missed field goals, a turnover on downs, a fumble recovery on defense. So when you get all those things on the defensive side of the ball, it's going to be a dominant victory like this one. All things considered, this should have been a larger margin of victory for San Diego than the 26 points. Their running game wasn't producing as much yardage as they would hope for, but they ended up being pretty balanced, getting 3 touchdowns on the ground in those end goal situations and 3 passing touchdowns through the air. So balanced attack on offense in terms of points scored. Defensively, this was their most dominant game of the season so far, and it bodes well for the Strike Force. If you were to see the Strike Force defense from last year, they were bad. It was a bad defense, gave up the most points in the league. The improvement that they made from last season to this season is not talked about nearly enough, and the coaching staff for San Diego deserves all the credit in the world for the makeover that they gave this team, and they have a new identity as the San Diego Strike Force now. They're not the team that you're going to get in a like you're going to be able to put 60-70 on every single week. Some teams do. It's not something where you go in and you start the game with 40 points on the board. That's not the San Diego team anymore. So this was San Diego's arguably most dominant victory of the season on both offense and defense. They get Frisco next week. That's probably going to be the game of the week. They looked great. They looked great in this one. And for Duke City, something's got to change. I know that sounds very, very dramatic and very general, but play calling wise, this game was a mess. Opening drive, Joe Mancuso scrambled for a 21-yard run for a touchdown. Then you don't run the ball with him again until there's 50 seconds left in the fourth quarter. How does that make sense? They were never fully out of this game until late in the third quarter. They were down 1 possession for most of the game, down 14 for the second half of the third quarter. They could have fought and clawed back with a balanced ground attack and passing attack, but they went pass heavy, which I guess I get considering how Joe Mancuso performed last week in the game against San Antonio. But that was against San Antonio's defense, which we know is not great, not that good. Joe Mancuso, he regressed a little bit. He ended up having 5 total turnovers in this game. A couple of them weren't totally his fault, but a couple of them were 100% his fault. So Mancuso Mania kind of got put on ice, which is sad for all the Mancuso maniacs out there like myself. But there was just no balance in the offense. 29 passing attempts to 11 rushing attempts. It's not a good ratio. San Diego has a good rushing defense. I'll give them that. But Duke City needed a bigger commitment to the ground game to have a better chance to open up those passing lanes for Joe Mancuso, to open up those mid to deep passing opportunities for Joe on those play actions. And there was just no commitment to it. They seem to only want to run the ball with Jeff Carr. Jeff Carr's a great running back. I understand that, but um, they were able to get chunks of yardage like 6 to 8 yards at a time when they were running with their wide receivers as well. So I think they need to really lean into getting more offensive playmakers involved in the rushing game to open things up, not just for the rushing game, but for the passing game as well. It's complementary football on the offensive side of the ball. Ever since Duke City traded Nate Davis last season to San Diego, ironically, their offense has just been in shambles. They've been a mess. They've been going through quarterbacks like crazy. And I don't think the answer is as simple as an adjusted game plan or an adjusted philosophy. They've already flipped some of the coaching staff from earlier this year, and they're still looking for their first win of the season at this point. And we're entering week 11 next week. They're still looking for their first win. It seems to me that it's time for a full reset and a full shuffle. I think there are some pieces you can keep on this Duke City team, but from the top down, it might be time to hit the big red button and figure something else out because this clearly isn't working. So that was IFL Week 10, a very strong group of games. Some games that were very, very close, some games that were very, very not close. But overall, the playoff picture got a little bit more clear in the West, a little bit foggier in the East, but good. That's good for the teams in the East. Everyone is still technically in it except for Jacksonville. I know they're still technically in it, but they're not in it. Let's be real. So a lot of teams still in the hunt, a lot of teams improving, a lot of teams making steps in the right direction, a few teams regressing and regressing badly, but overall the league is in good shape, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how these matchups over the next couple of weeks take shape. So looking ahead to week 11 of the IFL, we've got 6 games on this slate, so a shorter one than last week, but 6 games. We got one on Friday, 4 on Saturday, and one on Sunday. The first game we're going to look at is the Green Bay Blizzard at the Iowa Barnstormers on Friday at 7:05 Central. Green Bay's definitely going to be favored in this one, probably in the -8.5, -9.5 range, if not a little bit more after their decisive win. Now, I'm gonna scratch that. I'm gonna say 11.5. Given their decisive win over Frisco. Iowa looks pretty good on offense, but they're facing the very best defense in the IFL this upcoming week. So I would expect this total to probably be around 86, 87, considering that Green Bay just put up 67 last week. But I think Green Bay is going to go back to what their normal game plan is and what their normal output is. So probably going to be 86, 87, somewhere around that range. Next up, we've got the Tulsa Oilers at the Massachusetts Pirates. This game's taking place on Saturday, 6:05 Central. Tulsa is definitely not going to be the favorites in this one. Massachusetts is on a bit of a slide themselves, but Massachusetts is going to be the favorite in this. Probably looking at a -8.5, -9 line, somewhere in that range. Home field advantage for Massachusetts plus the travel, and Tulsa's just regressing terribly on offense. So over under probably going to be a little bit lower than you would think, probably in the 84, 83 range, because both defenses are pretty good and both offenses seem to have a little bit of a cap on top of them on what they can do at the moment. So probably going to be a lower scoring game, at least in terms of the total. But Tulsa needs this one badly. You can make the argument that Massachusetts needs this one badly as well. So this one's going to be a very good game. And this is going to be a deciding factor for both of them in terms of the playoff hunt at the end of the year. You're going to look back on this one in particular. Next up, we've got Duke City Gladiators going to Arizona to take on the Arizona Rattlers. This game is on Saturday, 8:05 Central. Duke City is for sure going to be the underdog in this one. Arizona, with Dalton Snead at quarterback, they're going to be the favorites. Duke City still looking for their first win. Dalton Snead is good for at least, I'd say at least 40, probably 50 points. So that I would imagine that the total for this is probably going to be 86 to 90, somewhere in that range. So Joe Mancuso and company have what it takes to put points on the board, but will they be able to keep up with Dalton Snead in Arizona? I don't know. I don't think they can. I'm having a really hard time finding where Duke City's gonna get a win on their schedule for the remainder of the year. It's going to surprise me whenever it does happen, but just looking at the schedule, I just can't see it. Next up, we've got the San Antonio Gunslingers at the Bay Area Panthers. This one's also on Saturday, 8:05 Central. This is going to be one of the two games where if you're going to watch any, this is the first one on Saturday that you must watch. San Antonio, absolutely incredible offense with Sam Castronova and everything that he's able to do. Bay Area recently turned it on with their offense last week. They've had a strong defense all year. So the reigning champs versus the best offense in the league. That's a headline that writes itself. Over under on this one has got to be over 100, 102, 103, somewhere in that range. And Bay Area's got to be the favorite, probably like a -7, -8, especially being the home team in this one. So this is going to be a very fun game. Highly recommend checking this one out. Next up, we've got the last game of Saturday. It's going to be the Tucson Sugar Skulls at the Northern Arizona Wranglers. Tucson coming off of their second win of the season last week. Northern Arizona getting that cross-country win in Massachusetts. Northern Arizona for sure is going to be the favorite in this one. Probably looking at a -9.5, -10, somewhere in that range. Over under, probably looking at a high 80s, low 90s, probably like a 92, 92 and a half. So this is going to be a pretty entertaining game, but the fact that it's going at the same exact time as San Antonio Bay Area is not great for them. But luckily, all the games are on YouTube and can be watched at a later time. So if you don't watch this one live, you can watch it at a later time when there's no other games going on. Then the last game of the slate takes place on Sunday at 5:05 Central. It's going to be the Frisco Fighters at the San Diego Strike Force. This is going to be the very best game of the week. Frisco's very talented team versus San Diego's very talented team. And I say very talented teams because offensively and defensively for both of these teams, they have had their moments of dominance. Last week, San Diego had a very dominant performance on defense. They've put up 60 plus so far this season. Frisco's done the same. They've had their defensive dominant moments. They put up 60 plus. So this could very easily be a 56-54 game, but this could also very easily be a 41-38 game, just because these teams are a lot more evenly matched than you would think. So I would imagine that the total line on this is probably going to be in the mid to high 90s, probably like a 94, 95, somewhere in that range. With I would imagine San Diego being the favorite just because they're the home team. Probably going to be a close line, probably like a -3.5. I could very easily see Frisco being favored as well, but coming off of that thrashing last week, I think it's all going to depend on the health of TJ Edwards if he's fully back in the mix for Frisco. But this is going to be a fantastic game and cannot recommend this one enough. And that's the show. Thank you so much for tuning in, watching, listening, wherever you are. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure that you give us a little thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and help us grow this thing out a little bit. If you're listening on Spotify, give us that 5-star rating. I think you got to go to the actual podcast page itself, and then you'll be able to give the rating. But it helps us get in front of other people and grow the show a little bit more. And speaking of growing the show, please give us a follow on Instagram, Twitter/X, and TikTok at Off the Wall FB on each of those. F as in foot, B as in ball, Off the Wall FB. Come troll me if you want. If it's funny, I won't be mad. If it's not funny, I will be furious. But come give us a follow. We're trying to post things in real time on Twitter/X as games are happening, and posting some highlights on Instagram and TikTok as well. So it's only 24 hours in a day, and the fact that you chose to spend an hour and a half, hour 45, however long this ends up being with me today on Off the Wall, much appreciated, and appreciate you checking us out. Big thank you to Malik Duncan again for stopping in for an interview. Go follow him on Instagram and follow his podcast as well. AFL Week 5, AFL seems to be turning the corner. Things are looking great in the new era of AFL with Jeff Fisher at commissioner, and IFL Week 11 is going to deliver like it always does with some premium matchups and some matchups that might be a little bit stinky. So go check those out if you haven't already. And yeah, let's have ourselves a great rest of our week, and we're going to be in for a great weekend of football. Take care. Bye.